My brother faked my death and stole everything while I worked in Iceland, but when I discovered the truth on Facebook and came back, I sent him to prison for 25 years and found out he also destroyed my relationship. I'm 30 years old. I'm a digital cartographer, and about 6 months ago I came back from Iceland after working there for 3 years to discover that my brother had told everyone I was dead. I'm not kidding. He literally faked my death, stole everything I had, and convinced my family that I had died in a car accident on some lost road in Iceland. And the thing is, I gave him power of attorney over my stuff because, you know, I was going to be in a super remote place without much internet connection, and I needed someone to handle my affairs while I was gone. I trusted him. He was my older brother. We had a good relationship, or so I thought, and it never, ever crossed my mind that he could do something like this. Let me back up a bit, because this is total insanity, and I need to explain how we got to this point. I grew up with Brendan, my brother, 2 years older than me, in a medium-sized town in the United States. Our dad died when I was like 12, pancreatic cancer, super fast and devastating. My mom was left alone with the two of us, and with a decent inheritance from dad's life insurance, and some investments he had made. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable, you know what I mean? Mom worked as a teacher, and with the inheritance money we were able to live comfortably. Brendan and I were always close, or at least I thought we were. He was the protective older brother. I was the nerd who liked geography and technology. We got along well, hung out together, that kind of thing. When I was like 24, I met Lindsay at a geospatial technology conference. It was incredible. We connected immediately, started dating, and honestly I thought she was the woman I was going to marry someday. Brendan seemed to get along well with her. The three of us would go out sometimes, everything normal. But looking back now, I remember that sometimes Lindsay would mention weird things, like that Brendan had told her I was considering moving across the country for a job, or that I had mentioned I wasn't sure about wanting a serious relationship. Things I had never said. I always dismissed them as misunderstandings, but turns out no. Brendan was actively sabotaging my relationship. Lindsay and I broke up after like a year and a half because she felt I wasn't committed to the relationship, that I always had one foot out the door. I was devastated but didn't understand where that was coming from because I was committed completely. Anyway, a couple years later, when I was 27, I was offered this incredible job in Iceland. A company was doing a massive digital mapping project of remote areas, and they needed someone with my experience to be in the field supervising data collection. The contract was for 3 years. Good salary, everything paid for. But the thing was, I was going to be in super remote places with limited internet access and communication. Sometimes weeks could go by without connection. I said yes immediately because it sounded like an incredible adventure, and honestly, I was still kind of depressed about Lindsay and wanted a change of scenery. Before leaving, Brendan offered to handle my stuff while I was away. I had a house I'd bought with part of my inheritance, bank accounts, investments, that kind of thing. He told me, "Look, give me power of attorney and I'll take care of everything, pay your taxes, manage your property, whatever you need. I'll make it easy so you don't have to worry about anything." And I said yes without thinking twice. He was my brother. We were 29 and 31 at that time. You think. Or maybe I was 27 and he was 29. The numbers get confused. But the point is, we were responsible adults, and I trusted him completely. I signed all the papers with the family lawyer, a guy named Bernard, who had worked with my dad before he died and had known Mom for years. Everything seemed legitimate and simple. I left for Iceland in August 2021. The first few months were amazing. I was working in landscapes that looked like they were from another planet, doing work I was passionate about, meeting local people in small towns when I went down to resupply. I communicated with Mom and Brendan when I could, maybe once a month, short emails or quick calls when I had signal. Brendan always told me everything was fine, that he was taking care of everything, not to worry. Mom seemed to be doing well too. She'd tell me about her work, about how Brendan and his wife, Samantha, were doing well with their daughter, Ruby, who would have been like 7 or 8 at that time. A year passed, then 2. I was so into my work that time flew by. I was in places so remote that sometimes a month would go by without talking to anyone from home. In my head, everything was fine. Brendan would send me occasional emails saying he'd paid my taxes, that the house was fine, things like that. He never gave me reasons to suspect anything. I'd send him photos of Iceland, tell him about my work, normal brother stuff. Or so I thought. In March 2024, like 2.5 years after I'd left, I was working in a particularly remote area of northern Iceland. My digital camera broke, one of the key pieces of my equipment, and I needed to replace it urgently. I had to go down to Reykjavik, which is the capital, to buy a new one. This meant like 2 days of travel by jeep, and then I was going to be in the city with decent internet for the first time in months. I was excited, honestly, thinking about buying the camera, eating food that wasn't freeze-dried, maybe video calling mom. I got to Reykjavik on a Tuesday afternoon. I checked into a hotel, took a long, hot shower, total luxury after months in the field, and connected to the hotel Wi-Fi. I opened my laptop, and the first thing I did was check my social media that I'd ignored for months. I had Facebook open and started scrolling to catch up on everything. And then I saw something that made my brain literally stop for a second. My college friend Wesley had posted like 2 weeks ago. Still can't believe Elliot is gone. Gonna miss you, brother. Rest in peace. I stared at the screen. I read the words like 5 times trying to process what they meant. What? Rest in peace? Me? I thought maybe there was another Elliot, that it was a weird misunderstanding. But then I saw the comments. People I knew saying things like, "It was so sudden, and I can't believe he died so young, and his poor family must be devastated." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My hands started shaking, and I had to put the laptop down on the bed because I thought I was going to drop it. I kept searching. I found more posts. My ex Lindsay had shared a photo of me with a really long message about how I had been an important person in her life, and how she regretted that things hadn't worked out between us. There was a memorial page on Facebook. A fucking memorial page with my profile picture and everything. It said I had died in a car accident on a remote Iceland road 3 months ago, that my body had been repatriated to the United States, that there had been a private funeral for close family only. I couldn't breathe. I literally felt like I couldn't get air into my lungs. I got up, walked around the hotel room, sat back down, read everything again. It didn't make sense. None of this made sense. I was alive. Obviously, I was alive. I was sitting in a hotel in Reykjavik reading about my own death. It was surreal. It was a nightmare. It had to be some kind of massive mistake. I grabbed my phone and called Wesley. It was like 2 inches the afternoon in Iceland, which meant it was early morning in the United States. But I didn't care. I needed answers now. Wesley answered after several rings, sounded sleepy. I said, "Wesley, it's me. It's Elliot." There was a long silence. Too long. And then he said, with a super weird and scared voice, "Who is this? Is this a joke? Who the fuck are you?" I said, "Wesley, seriously, it's me. It's Elliot. I'm alive. I don't know what's going on, but I'm alive." He started stuttering, saying that was impossible, that Brendan had told everyone I had died, that he'd seen photos from the funeral. What photos? That it couldn't be me. I had to convince him. I told him things only we knew from college, specific details of drinking sessions and trips we'd taken together. Finally, he believed me, or at least accepted that maybe it wasn't a cruel joke. He told me everything. He said Brendan had called all my friends 3 months ago, saying I had died in a car accident on an icy road in Iceland, that it had been instant, that my body had been recovered and cremated, that there had been a small, private funeral, because that was what I supposedly would have wanted. Wesley was crying on the phone at that point, saying he didn't understand anything, that what was happening, that this was crazy. I was crying at that point too, like sobbing in the hotel room. I told him I didn't know what was happening, but I was going to find out. I hung up and called Mom. The phone rang and finally went to voicemail. I called Brendan. Same thing. I called like 10 times each. Nothing. I sent text messages. "Mom, it's me. I'm alive. Please call me." Brendan, "What the fuck is going on? Call me now." Nothing. I started investigating more. I Googled my name. I found an obituary. A fucking obituary with my photo, my date of birth, saying I had died on December 15, 2023 inches Iceland. That I was survived by my mother, my brother Brendan, my sister-in-law Samantha, my niece Ruby. That donations could be made to a cartography foundation in my name. This was real. Someone had created this entire elaborate narrative of my death, had convinced everyone I knew, had done a fake funeral, and I knew it had to be Brendan. He was the only person with the access and information necessary to do something like this. It took me a moment, but then I started thinking about the implications. If Brendan had faked my death, what else had he done? He had power of attorney over all my stuff. My house, my money, everything. With hands still shaking, I tried to access my bank account online. The password didn't work. I tried to recover it using my email. The email associated with the account had been changed. I tried other accounts. Same problem. I couldn't access anything. I called my bank in the United States. It was like 4 inches the morning there, but they had 24-hour service. I explained the situation, said I was Elliot Harris, fake name obviously, but that I needed to access my account, that there was a problem. The representative asked me a bunch of security questions that I could answer because it was my fucking account, and then he said something that made my world collapse even more. He said, "Sir, according to our records, this account was closed in January 2024 after presentation of a death certificate and appropriate succession documents. The funds were transferred to the executor." I closed my eyes. My head hurt. I asked how much had been in the account when it closed. The representative hesitated, then said a number. It was everything I had. All my inheritance, my savings from years of working, everything. Like $450,000. All gone. Transferred to Brendan, I assumed. I asked about my house. The representative didn't have that information but suggested I contact the county property registry. I spent the next few hours in that hotel making calls, investigating, discovering the magnitude of what Brendan had done. My house had been sold in February for $320,000. My car had been sold. My investment accounts had been liquidated. Everything was gone. And not only that, I discovered that loans had been taken out in my name, credit cards I'd never applied for, debts totaling like $80,000 more. Brendan had used my identity, my supposed death, to rob me of everything and also leave me with massive debts. I was in total shock. Like sitting on the floor of the hotel room, unable to process anything. How does someone do this? How does your own brother do this to you? Not just the theft, which was already horrible, but the whole elaborate lie about my death. The fake funeral. Telling Mom her son was dead. Making her suffer through that. Why? Just for money? I tried calling Mom and Brendan like 50 more times that night. Nothing. Finally, around 3 inches the morning, I sent a long email to Mom, explaining everything. Telling her I was alive, that Brendan had lied, that I needed to talk to her urgently. I don't know if she read it because she never responded. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed up searching for more information, trying to understand. I found photos of the supposed funeral on social media from people who had gone. It was at our local church. There were flowers. There was a closed casket, empty, obviously. There were people crying. There were photos of Mom with dark glasses being hugged by Brendan. She looked devastated. My brother had made my mother believe I was dead, had made her suffer for months, all for money. The next morning, after like 2 hours of horrible sleep, I decided I had to get back to the United States immediately. I explained the situation to my boss on the phone, who obviously couldn't believe it, and he gave me emergency permission to leave. I bought a ticket for the first flight I could get, which left that same night. I had like 12 hours to kill in Reykjavik. I kept investigating. I searched for information about Mom and discovered something else that knocked me out. She was getting married in 2 weeks. I had found a post on Facebook from one of her friends congratulating her on the engagement, saying something about how it was beautiful that she had found love again after losing her son. The guy's name was Arthur. Apparently, they had met in a support group for people who had lost loved ones, which made me feel even worse because she was there for a fake death. The wedding was going to be in 2 weeks. Small ceremony at the church. Something clicked in my brain. 2 weeks. If I went back now, I'd arrive just in time. And a crazy, dramatic, probably stupid idea started forming. I could show up at the wedding. I could confront Brendan in front of the whole family, in front of Mom, in front of everyone. Prove I was alive in the most undeniable way possible. The flight back was torture. I can't even describe the mental state I was in. I oscillated between absolute fury and devastating sadness. I kept thinking about all the times Brendan and I had been close, all the memories I had of us being brothers. Had it all been fake? Had he always planned to do something like this? Or was it an impulsive decision when he saw the opportunity? I landed in the United States after like 15 hours of flights with connections. I didn't go to any of my online accounts, didn't try to contact anyone else, didn't want to risk Brendan finding out that I knew. I went straight to a hotel, near where Mom lived, paid cash, basically hid. During the next week and a half, I hired a private investigator who confirmed everything I had discovered, and more. Turns out Brendan had forged a death certificate using contacts in the system. How? I'm not completely sure, but we eventually discovered that the family lawyer, Bernard, had been involved. Bernard had worked with Brendan to falsify legal documents, death declarations, a whole network of fraud. Brendan had used my inheritance money to pay off massive debts he had, gambling debts, it turned out, and had spent the rest on God knows what. The house sold, the money had gone to his account. Everything had gone to him. But that wasn't all. The investigator discovered that Brendan had also taken money from Mom. He had told her he needed like $50,000 for funeral expenses, to repatriate my body, for a bunch of fake costs. Mom had taken money out of her retirement to give to him. All stolen. And the thing with Lindsay, my ex. The investigator found text messages that Brendan had sent her years ago from my phone when I'd leave it with him. Messages saying things he knew would damage the relationship. He had called her work once pretending to be me, canceling an important date we had. He had actively sabotaged my relationship for months until we broke up. Why? Maybe because he saw that I was happy and he couldn't stand it. Or maybe because he was already planning to rob me and didn't want someone in my life who would ask too many questions. The wedding day arrived. Saturday afternoon, ceremony at 3. I was a nervous wreck. I hadn't talked to Mom, hadn't contacted anyone. I put on the most decent suit I had in my luggage from Iceland, which wasn't much, but it was enough. I got to the church around 2:45. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. The church was small, intimate. There were like 40 people. I saw Brendan immediately, standing up front like the best man or something. He looked good, expensive suit, smiling. Samantha was there with Ruby, who would be like 10 years old by then. I saw Mom waiting to enter, dressed in a beautiful light blue. She looked happy but also tired. You know what I mean? Like someone who had been through a lot but was trying to move forward. Arthur was up front waiting, a guy about 55 who looked kind. I stayed in the back. The music started. Mom began walking down the aisle. Everyone stood up. Me too. And then I shouted. I didn't plan exactly what to say, but it came out. Mom, Mom, it's me. Everyone turned around. The silence was absolute. Mom saw me and literally stopped in the middle of the aisle. The expression on her face, I'll never forget it. It was shock, confusion, and then something that looked like terror, like she was seeing a ghost. She started shaking. Her bouquet fell to the floor. Someone screamed. I think it was one of her friends. I started walking down the aisle toward her. Mom, it's me. It's Elliot. I'm alive. Brendan lied about everything. I could hear murmurs exploding in the church, people getting up, total confusion. I saw Brendan, and the expression on his face was, it was pure fear. He went pale, like all the color left his face. He saw me, and I knew in that moment that he knew it was all over. Mom still wasn't moving, just staring at me with huge eyes. I got to her and said softly, Mom, it's me. It's really me. She raised a trembling hand and touched my face, like verifying I was real. And then she broke. She started crying, like sobbing, and collapsed. I had to catch her. Arthur ran toward us too, not knowing what to do but wanting to help. The church was total chaos at that point. People shouting questions, someone crying, Samantha grabbing Ruby and leaving quickly, and Brendan tried to run. He literally tried to leave through a side door. But I shouted, "That man robbed me of everything and faked my death. Someone stop him." Several men from the congregation, including Arthur's, a father who turned out to be ex-police, grabbed him. Brendan started yelling that it was a misunderstanding, that he could explain, but no one believed him anymore. Someone called the police. They arrived in like 10 minutes. By then, Mom was sitting in a pew, still in shock, holding my hand so tight it hurt, like she was afraid I would disappear if she let go. I was explaining everything to her in quick whispers, everything I had discovered. She just shook her head, saying no, 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 over and over. The police took Brendan away. I was explaining to the officer in charge everything that had happened, showing him evidence on my phone, the documents the private investigator had gathered. They took my official statement right there in the church. The wedding, obviously, was canceled. Arthur was incredibly understanding about everything, said the only thing that mattered was that Mom was okay and that this situation got resolved. The next few days were a whirlwind. I went to the police station multiple times. I filed formal charges against Brendan. The fraud department opened a massive investigation. Samantha, Brendan's wife, came to see me on the third day. She was destroyed, crying, saying she had no idea about anything. That Brendan had told her the money they had was from successful investments he'd made, that she never questioned where it came from because she trusted him. She believed me immediately when I showed her the evidence. Samantha turned out to be crucial to the case. She went to their house and started looking for documents. She found an entire file that Brendan had hidden in his office, with copies of the forged documents, bank transfers, everything. She turned it all over to the police and offered to cooperate fully with the investigation. She also filed for divorce immediately. The investigation revealed more shit than I had discovered. Brendan had been planning this for years. It wasn't impulsive. He had started stealing small amounts from my accounts even before I left for Iceland, amounts I wouldn't notice. He had sabotaged job opportunities that had been offered to me before the Iceland project, wanting me to accept one that would get me out of the country for a long time. He had manipulated Lindsay into breaking up with me. It had been systematic, calculated, evil. Bernard, the family lawyer, was also arrested. Turns out he and Brendan had been working together on various fraud schemes, not just with me. They had scammed other people too. It was a massive criminal network. Brendan was put under house arrest initially, awaiting trial. But 2 weeks into being there, he cut off his ankle monitor and tried to escape. Samantha called us in a panic, saying she couldn't find Brendan or Ruby. We thought he had kidnapped his own daughter. Police issued an Amber Alert. It was terrifying, like everyone thought the worst. But Samantha, who was reviewing more documents, found something. Brendan had plans to flee to Canada where, apparently, he had hidden bank accounts with part of the money he'd stolen from me. There were documents showing he planned to take Ruby, change their identities, and disappear. She gave this information to the police immediately. They caught Brendan at the Canadian border like 12 hours later. He had Ruby with him, who was terrified and crying. He had basically kidnapped her, telling her they were going on vacation. When they arrested him, he tried to resist and ended up with additional charges for that too. The trial was like 9 months later. Brendan was charged with massive fraud, identity theft, document forgery, attempted kidnapping, and like 20 more charges. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Samantha testified. I testified. The private investigator testified. There were mountains of documents. Brendan pleaded not guilty at first, trying to argue that it was all a misunderstanding, that I had given him permission to use the money. But nobody believed him. He was found guilty on all charges. The sentence was 25 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 15 years. When I heard the verdict, I felt Relief, I guess, but also a deep sadness. He was my brother. We had grown up together, and now he was going to be in prison for the rest of what remained of his useful life. I recovered most of my money eventually. Not all of it, because Brendan had spent a significant portion, but most of it. The accounts in Canada were frozen, and the funds repatriated. The sale of the house was legally reversed, although by that point the new owners had already made renovations, so it was a legal mess that took months to resolve. Eventually, I received the value of the house plus damages. The money was put in a complex trust, part for me, part for Ruby, because, it wasn't her fault that her father was a monster and she was going to need help for college and therapy and everything else. Mom has been in therapy. We've all been in therapy. Honestly, she and Arthur finally got married, like 6 months after the initial drama, tiny ceremony with only very close family. Arthur is a good person. He's helping Mom process everything. She still has nightmares about believing I was dead. Has episodes where she gets anxious if she doesn't hear from me for a couple days. Samantha and Ruby are rebuilding their lives. Samantha got a good job. They're going to family therapy. Ruby is in a good school. I've established a relationship with them, aunt and niece basically, although it's weird because I'm closer in age to Samantha. I help financially when I can, because it's not their fault. And Ruby deserves a normal life. And Lindsay, after everything came to light, she contacted me. She said she'd seen the news about the case, that she couldn't believe Brendan had been so manipulative with all of us. We met for coffee to talk. Turns out the things that had caused our breakup, all the doubts she had about my commitment, had been planted by Brendan. We talked through everything, years of misunderstandings and pain caused by my brother's lies. I don't know where our relationship goes now, like we just reconnected a few months ago, but we're talking, we're taking it slow, and it's good. It's something positive in the middle of all this shit. I went back to my job in Iceland for a while, finished the project because, honestly, I needed to be away from everything for a bit to process, but now I'm back in the United States more permanently. I'm working on establishing a foundation to help victims of family financial fraud, because apparently it's much more common than I thought and people need resources and support. And Brendan? I haven't gone to visit him. Mom went once, said he cried and asked for forgiveness, but she doesn't know if it was genuine or just because he's in prison. Samantha has cut off all contact except what's necessary for divorce papers. Ruby asks about her dad sometimes, and it's heartbreaking, because what do you tell her? How do you explain to a 10-year-old girl that her father did such horrible things? The other night, I was talking to Wesley, the friend who answered my call from Iceland, and he asked me if I'm ever going to be able to forgive Brendan. I told him the truth, that I don't know. Part of me understands that he must have had serious problems, addictions, debts, something that led him to do this. But another part of me can't get over the fact that he made me believe my life was safe with him, that I could trust him, and then not only robbed me but made my mom believe I was dead. That's a level of cruelty I don't understand. It's something I don't know if I can forgive. Honestly, I guess the point of telling all this is, I don't know, a warning maybe. When you give someone power of attorney, even family, especially family, make sure there's oversight. Make sure it's not just one person with total access to your life. Establish limits. Put conditions. Check. Regularly. Trust. But verify. You know what I mean? And if you ever find yourself in a situation where something feels wrong, where someone is doing weird things with your money or your information, investigate. Don't ignore your instincts, because it's family, or because they would never do that. And the consequences can destroy not just your financial life, but your entire emotional life and your relationships. I'm 30 years old, and I'm rebuilding a life I thought I had secure. I'm learning to trust again, which is incredibly difficult. But I'm here. I'm alive, obviously. And I guess that's something. It's more than Brendan wanted me to have, anyway.